Sherman, looking at your bio, you have a lot of strings to your bow. You have the podcast with Adam Young called Sweet Spot, which I really love. It's kind of like a deep dive into these niche topics I find really informative. You have your Practical Golf newsletter, which I really enjoy, and you also have the Four Foundations of Golf, the book, which is where I encountered you first. And you're also doing YouTube videos now. So am I right in saying this is a full-time kind of thing for you now, the whole golf industry?
Yeah, it's I started it. It's crazy. Almost 11 years. I started it in January of 2015 as a blog. It was really a website first. And yeah, I'd say the last 5 or 6 years I've been doing this full time. So yeah, it's evolved over the years from me writing articles on the internet to starting the podcast with Adam, writing the book. And then the last year I realized, well, everyone's making videos, so I better make some videos too. So I've been focusing really hard on YouTube the last year, and that's been going well. So yeah, I was good at writing, got better at spoken word, and then trying to present the information on camera. So all over the place.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, you just have like an ability, like, a common sense approach, a down to earth way of like explaining golf and breaking it down to its component parts that just makes it more digestible and kind of easier to comprehend because it's so complicated and there's so much information out there. So we in the golfing community have a lot to thank you for, I think.
Thanks. I mean that's the best compliment anyone can pay me because yeah, I've been for a long time trying to simplify what feels like a complicated game, and that's really hard to do. I wasn't very good at it in the beginning. I'm still getting better at it. But that's what I feel like my role is in the industry. I'm trying to kind of connect all of the big dots for people that sometimes we just can't notice because we're so like focused in our own games. It's hard to, see the big picture, and that's what I try and do.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, just with like social media and just everybody has their own kind of 2 cents on how best to play the game and everything. So just
Yeah.
your book and your content, I feel is just like it just kind of removes all the fat and you just get to the core, the good stuff that we need to be focusing on. So yeah,
Thank you.
I thought maybe we could just dive into the deep end and get into the weeds. I know, like in the first or second chapter of your book, you talk about kind of an incident that happened on the golf course many years ago when you were with your dad, and I think it's something
Yeah.
we can all sympathize with, just anger and frustration and how kind of pervasive it is in the game of golf, and just
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it's not a problem for everyone. It was a problem for me for a while when I was younger. I'm 42 now, and I think my anger was at its worst when I was a teenager, and in my early to mid 20s. And I think, the main issue I had was that my expectations were mismanaged. So the scores I thought I was entitled to and what I thought I deserved were not showing up. And in retrospect, I wasn't putting the work in, I wasn't playing enough. So because I had such a massive disconnect between what I wanted and what I was willing to put in, naturally, when I got on the course and, after 5 or 6, 7 holes, things weren't going according to this scoring plan. Yeah, I would lose my temper sometimes, and not excessively, but the incident that I wrote about in my book was really like the straw that broke the camel's back, where I launched a club at my bag and my dad was with me and it broke the club and he walked off the course. One of those moments where it was like, I'd never really seen my dad that disappointed in me
right,
before. And I realized I'm like, this is a bit of a rock bottom here, man. So
right.
maybe you need to reevaluate your relationship with the game. And yeah, it happens. I wouldn't, I've been much better at it over the years. We actually recorded an episode this year where I was playing in a tournament and I actually had a little bit of an anger outburst a couple of months ago in a tournament. Not nearly as bad, but yeah, I was pissed at myself.
Mhm.
And I just kind of like reflected on it and thought about like, what caused it, why it happened, and then just tried to unravel that the best I could. And it always gets back to mismanaged expectations for a lot of us. So that's, I'm not immune to it, and I know a lot of golfers struggle with it.
Yeah, no, especially when you're like in the heat of the battle, it's kind of hard to just
Yeah.
remove yourself from the situation and get some perspective. It's easy as onlookers to say, you're hitting the ball around the field and you're getting angry over something quite trivial, but when you're at the other side of it, it can really get in you. Yeah, it's like no other thing that I do in my life that if I play well and I score well, I feel so good about my life and myself in general, and I feel I'm a good person. And then when I play bad and things don't go my way, it just it just gets you. I don't know what's
Yeah.
going on there.
It's the you know, when I try and describe this to non-golfers, they, as you said, they're like, what? Or like, why would you get so, and I know exactly what you said is that there are moments where things are going well and it feels like it's reaffirming good things about you as a person. And when it's not going
Totally.
well, it's like, oh, I'm impatient. I can't do this. I've always liked golf because I felt like I was kind of fighting against my flaws in a way and overcoming them, which was a good thing at times. But yeah, there's a part of you that if you take it so seriously and maybe it means too much that it kind of makes you feel less as a person. And that is crazy to say it out loud, but I know that people can really genuinely feel that way. And that's why I always take time after every round to kind of think through what happened and ask
Mhm.
myself that question of like, did I have a good attitude? Did I enjoy myself? Did, maybe I got a little pissed off today? And I try and think about those things because when you don't, it just kind of like builds up over time and then leads to even bigger outbursts, unfortunately.
Yeah, totally. And I think when you get to a certain level, as you said before, you kind of feel almost entitled and like you deserve to play well and to get a particular
Yeah.
score. And if that's your attitude, golf is it's going to give you kind of a dose of reality
Yeah.
quite soon.
The worst trap that I think a lot of us fall victim to is that let's say we have kind of a round where everything comes together and you shoot a score that's like way below your average and then you think, oh, well, this is me, this is my new, this is my new level, and I've done this several
Yeah,
times over the years, and then you like kind of fall backwards and you're like, wait a second, I'm not that golfer. And it really messes with your head. And that's, you know, hard to understand that it was an outlier. And because it's an outlier, you can't expect that to happen every time now. So yeah, the game does this at times. It teases us with these outlier on the good side. And then also on the bad side too. You have days where things really just don't work out and then you feel very bad about your game and maybe you're catastrophizing and it's really not that
hmm
bad either. So it
yeah.
works in both directions and yeah, perspective is kind of a superpower.
Yeah, sure. You know, one of the most effective things I've come across is like Carl Morris. He talks about like gratitude for the game. And like
Yeah.
anytime now, like obviously when I was younger, I used to play like multiple times a week, but now it's like not so frequent. And I try to take a moment before I play a game now just for like, just like this might be the last time I play. This might be the last time I play with my dad or my friends. And it just puts it in perspective, you know. And I actually went so far, would you believe? It was Christmas time. I was thinking about a gift to get my old lad in Ireland. And I was telling him about like all the things I read about, like in your book, etc. And I was like, how can I, get him a gift to help his golf game, if not his mental game? And I was like, I was thinking, so I got him a putter head with like images of skulls. It's quite morose and morbid. But basically, it was like anytime he's out there playing and he gets angry or annoyed, he can look at his putter head and be like, look, it's impermanent. This, who knows what's going to happen? This might be my last game
Yeah.
of golf. Put it in perspective.
I think having some type of, we could call it a mental anchor or a mental perspective anchor when you play is really important. And I love that you mentioned Carl because he's one of my favorite coaches as well. We love talking with him on our show and we've been on his show. And yeah, I think for me, it's becoming a dad actually made me better at golf because it gave me that perspective. And I always say, like, my kids really don't care about my golf game and
hmm
not in like a negative way. It's just that, kids, when you're a parent and what your children want from you is what are you going to do for them? Are you going to love them? Are you going to pay attention to them? And I say, oh, I shot this score. And they're like, okay, great, whatever. And kind of their, disinterest in my scores helped me because in moments when I was on the course in a tournament where I felt like, oh man, I've really got to do this. This is an important moment. I kind of remind myself, I'm like, well, if I do it or don't do it, I really won't be that different in the eyes of my children. And that has been, helpful to me to find that perspective. And, if you need to look at the skull and crossbones and think about death, if you need to think about that we're on this little rock in the middle of this space and nothing will really mean anything in the grand scheme of things, you could do that too. But I think everyone needs to find some type of, perspective that they could go to in those moments where they're genuinely losing it and remind themselves that like, yeah, we're just hitting a little white ball around a field. Like, calm down.
Sure. Yeah. And you mentioned it in your book as well under the mental game, like just how like nobody really cares about your game and what you
No,
shoot. You
they
know what I
don't.
mean?
They really don't. I mean, they do in fleeting moments, but they're like everything else in life. They're going to go back to thinking about, their own problems and whatever they're thinking about versus what they've noticed on you. And of course, I always put an asterisk there. If you're being a poor playing partner, which, let's say you're losing your temper excessively, slowing down the group or being a nuisance to the group, like, yeah, people will notice that if you're not a pleasant playing partner. But if you're just playing around and struggling and they're going to say, "Oh, I've struggled too. I know what that feels like." So, no one can really point fingers at each other in that way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Maybe we could pivot now to like I totally appreciate what you say in the book, and I just my range sessions over the years, for as long as I can remember, I do not enjoy going to the range hitting balls, and it's always been just I get bored after 10 or 15 shots, and just to introduce kind of a very like just doing different things with the ball and not just like hitting the same one after another. And I was just wondering if you could talk about some strategies that we could use to just improve our time at the range.
Yeah, and I would say myself, like, I'm not a range rat. I don't like hitting millions of golf balls. Some people do, and if they have a lot, someone wrote to me on Twitter the other day, like, "Oh, I practice for 2 hours. Is that a good or a bad thing?" I'm like it's fine with me if you're enjoying it. Like, I mean, if you start saying, "Oh, I practice for 2 hours, I better shoot under par," well, then we might have a problem.
Right.
So I think like the basic elements of effective practice are like intent and engagement. So intent would be, are you at least taking a time on every shot or most shots you're hitting to establish a target, go through
Mm,
some type of alignment process, and have an intention for the shot that you would on the golf course or that hopefully you would on the golf course. A lot of people, myself included, can fall victim to just raking balls. So, just taking a brief second. Sometimes I'll talk about putting the bucket of balls behind you to force you to like go back and pick it
mm,
up and put it back down. So at least it forces you to align yourself and just take a moment to think about what you're doing. So intent can have many different versions. That's a very basic one. That could also be, drills you're doing if you're working with a swing instructor. If you're not working with a swing instructor, it could be some of the skill-based stuff that, my co-host Adam Young is really good at helping people with. That could be working on impact fundamentals, like, as small as where you're striking it on the face. So intent can have a lot of different forms. And then engagement is also another successful ingredient to practice because if you're mindlessly hitting balls, that's not really what happens on the golf course. You ever walk up to a tee shot on a par three and hit your 7 iron like it was the 20th 7 iron you'd hit in a row on the range? Like, no, you're
right.
you're worried about it. You're thinking about it. You're thinking about what it means in the context of your score. You're worried about what's around the green. Like you are in a totally different frame of mind than you are on the practice range.
Hmm.
And you can't recreate that completely on the practice range, but you can do a better job of it, whether that's perhaps a performance game or at least taking time to absorb the shot and marry that intent with like your engagement level. So, whether it's practice games, going through routine on every shot, I think getting lessons is a good idea for golfers if they're capable of it. Getting ideas from an instructor on how to make your practice sessions better with drills they would prescribe to you. So there's many different ways to do it, but I feel like you need to satisfy those two basic things as much as possible.
Yeah, totally. Like one of my biggest bugbears about ranges is just like the hitting off mats. I mean, it's so
It's
artificial and
hard, yeah.
the golf course are always uneven lies, you know what I mean? And it just you almost get into a false sense of security. You could be fatting
Sure.
it by, a few inches, but you don't really get that feedback.
Well, that's the thing is you have to really accept the limitations of the environments and how different they are. So what most golfers do is that they see that performance on the range where they might have been chunking it on the course, but the iron bounced off the mat and they still hit a good one.
Right.
Sorry about that. And you just need to understand the difference between the two environments. And I'll be quite honest with you, he doesn't mind me saying this. The pro golfer that I coach, um, Mackenzie Hughes, who's really good. I mean, he's won on the PGA Tour. He's made millions of dollars playing professional golf. He complains to me sometimes about how great he's hitting it on the range and says, well, why can't I do that on the course? So, and this is a guy who literally every week of his life is working on his game. He has pretty much unlimited time to get good at golf. And he even struggles with the difference in the environments. I have to remind him of this. So, and he practices really well. He's very diligent, has tons of games. Like he's a great practicer and he gets frustrated with this as well. So I can't tell you how many messages I've got where it's the same thing. I'm hitting it so great on the range. Where's that golfer on the course? Well, they're two different environments and therefore they are two different golfers.
Yeah. Because I think the problem is as well when you're on the range, it's not like we'll say like a sport like tennis or snooker or even like darts. You're on the kind of course of playing field
Yeah,
when
it's
you're
the same
practicing.
thing. Yep. Yep.
So just being at the range is somewhat artificial. It's just like a shooting range or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the only exception I would say to that is driver. I've done a lot of great work with my driver over the years
Like kind
because
of
that
speed
is
sessions.
no, it would just even set up like getting the right tee height. Like that is the one shot that you can hit in practice that will be identical to the golf course because you control the tee height. You have full
Right.
control over your setup, or even you could say hitting a fairway wood or whatever tee club you're going to use. Like that is the one shot that you can truly recreate in practice. And I always tell people I want them to practice with their driver a lot the right way because I believe it's the singular most important club for scoring. Some would say putter, but I disagree with that.
Right. Yeah. Under the expectations part of your book, you have like the PGA Tour fallacy, and I've kind of never heard it like in that way before, and it's so common, but I just never heard it broken down like that before. So could you kind of elaborate on what that is?
Sure. I just, from my own experience being a pro golf fan since I'm, 9, 10 years old, I watched a lot of pro golf. Tiger turned pro when I was taking up golf. So naturally, like I was watching him all the time and many other tour players. And I didn't realize it, but it kind of like subliminally gave me a version of golf that like it sounds ridiculous saying it out loud that I expected of myself on the course. Like I would see them like sucking iron shots back, when they were playing baladas. And when the courses were soft, they would tear them apart. And I would go to the course, be like, "Oh, it just rained out. We could really hit it close today." Like thinking I was gonna like land it 5 feet from the hole.
Right.
And yeah, what did it do? It created, as we spoke about earlier, a lot of anger and frustration because I was being shown a version of golf that technically didn't exist. So now, we have in America, we have ESPN Plus, and you could watch PGA Tour live. And I'm sure there's, Sky Sports and other networks around the world have this too, where you could literally follow a group around their entire round. And if you watched a run-of-the-mill tour player on a Thursday morning in a tournament go shoot, plenty of 75s and 76s that happen that no one pays attention to, yeah,
Mm.
you're going to see a lot of like looser shots and a really kind of unspectacular version of pro golf versus the normal broadcast, which is just a highlight reel. You're being shown all the best shots. There's 50, 100 balls in the air at any point. So they could always, show you, oh, this putt was drained from 25. You see putt after putt go in and iron shots next to the pin and drive and people hitting miraculous recovery shots out of the trees. And they're not even doing it all the time. You're just being shown when it happens. And then they narrow in on the players who are playing the best that week towards the end of the tournament. So yeah, you're not being shown a realistic version of golf for even pros. And then we watch this and we're like, oh, that's what good golf looks like. And it's like, well, not really. Well, first of all, they're pros, and secondly, like they're not even as good as they look on TV half the
Right.
time. So yeah, that's why in the book I kind of break down some of the stats and things behind that show you that no, they're not hitting it to 5 feet all the time. Like I get people on Twitter all the time who are like, oh, I get so angry if I don't hit my sand wedge inside a 10 feet from 100 yards out. And I'm like, are you insane? Like, and they claim that they do it. I'm like, a tour player can't get inside of 15 feet on average for an entire season. Like that's best on tour. I'm like, stop it. Like that's just insane.
Yeah, no, that's a very powerful framework to use. Like I remember a few years ago, I went to the Irish Open actually, and Rory was playing. And the
Mm.
two shots I got to see him play, he hit the ball like he did. It didn't. Nobody clapped after he hit it. They were kind of
Yeah.
like Rory's
Yeah.
able to do that. I seen Rasmus Højgaard, like Sky at Treewood, maybe 150 yards, and that, as you say, you're not going to see that on TV. And when you're there in real life,
No.
they're really bad golf shots that these, 1% of 1% are hitting. And it
Yeah.
just again puts it into perspective on how hard this game is, and you just have to mitigate mistakes
Yeah.
around the
That was a
course.
pretty exciting end to the Irish Open this year by Rory.
It was phenomenal. Yeah, it was a good
Unbelievable
year.
year.
Unbelievable. Yeah. No, it's so true. So actually, just on the topic of expectations, I'm not sure if you ever came across Timothy Galloway's book called On the Inner Game of Golf.
Yeah, I've actually yet. So I intend to read the inner game of tennis and the inner game of
Right.
golf, because I've heard, the inner game of tennis, I think, was kind of like a massive book when it came out. I know he released a golf version, but I'm still they're still on my list to read, so I have not read them yet.
Right. Yeah. No, there's just a fascinating little, I don't even think it's a chapter, it's just a part of the book where it's titled like The Beginner Who Misunderstood Par. So this guy, I'm not even sure if it's a real story and it actually happened, but it kind of demonstrates something deeper. Just like a beginner, he takes up the game, he starts playing on his own, and he realizes par four, par three, oh, this is what's normal, this is what's expected. So
Yeah,
eventually, after a few rounds, he shoots around par, and he just thinks it's normal. He's playing on his own, and then he plays with other people and he tells them what he's scoring and they're like, wow, that's amazing, you're only a beginner and you're shooting par already. And then after he realizes how difficult it is and how judgmental kind of par is like a benchmark, and then
yeah.
his scores kind of balloon after that. So but that's a guy I see who had no expectation maybe about what's going to happen or what's expected of me. And I guess, would you advise people to have, I guess, no expectations about what's going to happen, or kind of to
No, I think it's unrealistic. We just recorded an episode on someone was asking me like, how do I not think about my score? I'm like, you have to think about your score because we play a game where we get, a score after every hole and every round. Like it's an important part of the game. So I don't think it's realistic to tee off expecting not to think about your score or where you stand relative to par. I think you can get really good at redirecting your mind to more productive thoughts. So, for example, you mentioned that passage from the book about relating to par. So, something I wrote recently is the concept of a good bogey. So, what's the difference between a golfer who breaks 190 or 80? Most people would be like, oh, they're making more birdies than pars. Like, yes, pars are part of it for sure. Birdies, not really. But the big separator and drops in scoring for most golfers are going to come from double bogeys or worse. And this is kind of a rallying call that I've had the last decade. And one of the easiest ways to stop bleeding strokes in these moments is making good bogeys. And that's a concept where a lot of people find themselves in trouble and their mind's racing and they're angry at themselves and they start doing stupid things because they're trying to make par, because their reference point is still par. Like that's what I should be making on every hole.
Mhm.
And if you could simply say something different to yourself and say, what can I do to make a good bogey here? Well, then all of a sudden, maybe you don't feel that tremendous pressure on yourself. Maybe you're not as angry. And more importantly, you'll make a better strategic decision. Um, and that's really the difference in golfers, whether they want to accept it or not. They want to think that better golf is about hitting more spectacular shots. And in a sense, it is on some level, but more of it is about when you're in trouble and things aren't going well and the decisions you make in those moments that are the difference between shooting a 94 and an 88. And so I would say, a lot of golfers need to embrace that concept of what could I do to make a good bogey here versus what can I do to make par, because it changes what you're going to do. That simple question.
Mhm. Yeah, no, totally. I was wondering, John, do you have any training devices that you recommend? Because I mean, now I guess it's the off season, and we can kind of work on things off the course to kind of improve our game. And are there any things that you use personally, or that would come to mind that you'd recommend to people?
Yeah, it's training aids have been hard for me over the years. Like I can list some of the ones that I like and have used, but the thing with training aids is that you can't expect like universal adoption that's going to work for everyone. So yeah, I mean the swing speed stuff, like I think Super Speed Golf and the Stack, and I know there's a million others at this point. If you're interested in working on your swing speed, I think those are pretty reliable training aids. They have very good, systems behind it, and smart people have designed them. I've always been a fan of the Orange Whip just because
Mm.
I feel like I used to swing it a lot when I had issues with my transition and tempo. And that's like a training aid that I would say to people being like, this isn't going to make you worse. Like there are training aids that will make certain golfers worse.
Hmm.
Not because, some of them are poorly designed and some of them just aren't relevant to you, and it's hard to know the difference there. But like something like the Orange Whip, I'm like, I'd have a hard time believing that someone would get worse at golf, like training with that thing. I can't guarantee it'll get better, but for some people, it might help them.
Yeah.
Hack Motion is a very cool piece of technology. They've worked with us on our podcast. That's more a bit nerdier and in depth. It's going to talk about your wrist angles and club face control. It's something that's, I'm a big believer in, and the
Is that the thing
I
you wear
would
on your
say,
forearm? Is that what
yeah,
the hack
it
motion?
goes on your wrist and it gives you some advice. I would say that's one of the better pieces of training aid technology out there.
Okay.
Um, Trying to think what else off the top of my head. I mean, it always comes back to Dr. Scholl's foot spray for me and Adam on the podcast. Just spray your face and see where you're
Mm.
hitting it on the club. Another one is Tour Tempo. That was in my book. I love the Tour Tempo app where you kind of match your swing to the beats of a 3-to-1 ratio. So yeah, there's obviously way more that I listed.
Hmm.
It's just hard for me to say like, oh, this one is going to be great for you.
Yeah, actually, that's I came across Tour Tempo in your book, and I did a bit more research. I got the app, and that's like amazing because you can like
It's
practice to
wonderful.
it, and you can
It's so
bring it on
good.
the course. It's awesome, yeah, and it's really like a low hanging fruit, really, to improve your game, right? Just tempo, and you kind of it gets you out of swing thoughts and analyzing things, and
Yep.
also the DST compressor that you mentioned in your book. I got that, and I was
Yeah,
like, that's
so
such a useful
yeah.
tool. Do you still use it?
DST was a game I don't. I actually lost mine, but I think I was already past the point of using it a lot.
Okay.
But that's an example of a training aid that was very helpful to me. But for certain players, the challenge might be too hard for them because you can't cheat it. So, some training aids I don't think are good because they're not challenging enough, and others I think are not good because they're too challenging. And it's hard to
Hmm.
say like which one will fit that mold for you based on where you are in the game. So the compressor was great for me. I could see some players really struggling with it and throwing it away after 2 rounds because it's a very challenge. Like it's one of the
It
harder
is.
training aids I've ever used.
It's tough. When I got it initially, I was like pulling everything left with
Oh
a
yeah, you
hook, and
pull
I was like,
everything
"What's
left,
going
or
on?"
yeah, you either pull it or you shank it, like, and you're
Yeah,
just it forces you to have hands really far ahead at impact, and
yeah,
control the club face at the same time. So I could say that would be like the singular swing aid that I think improved my game the most, I would say.
yeah. No, likewise. Yeah, no, it's really, really useful. Yeah, I'm curious, John. Do you personally, or do you recommend people to take notes? Like, like somebody like Matt Fitzpatrick, who writes down diligently
Yeah.
notes after every shot he hits, which is remarkable. He's been doing it for years. But I can
Yeah.
only imagine it would be a useful thing. You just kind of have to have discipline.
Well, it's only useful if you're going to use the information. So
Mhm.
if you said to yourself like, "Oh, Fitzpatrick is very diligent in taking notes. I will do the same." But you're not going through the same analysis that Matt goes through, and
Mhm.
you're just doing it for the sake of doing it. Kind of similar, like I would say someone having a pre-shot routine that looked like their favorite professional golfer. Just because you're going through that routine or taking all the stats doesn't mean that's going to help you. So I think, if you're a data inclined person and you enjoy doing that, I think it's wonderful. And then you have to go the extra step and look back on it and say, what meaningful takeaways am I going to get from this? Because, knowing that you don't get up and down enough from bunkers or you don't hit your driver far or you're not hitting enough greens, like that's great. That's nice surface level information, but you have to really get to the why.
Mhm.
Is it poor strategic decisions? Is it more of a club face control issue? Are you not getting up and down because your ground contact stinks? Like, if you're gonna do it, you got to get down to like the actual thing that's holding you back from not getting that number to where it should be. And there's a plenty of tools now, whether it's Arco, Shot Scope, Tangent.
Mhm.
There's a million of these apps now, and they are all quite helpful and have a different spin on how to do it. So I like it. I'm all for it. But again, I don't want someone to do it for the sake of doing it who's actually not going to make any changes or learn anything from the data. Like just collecting data on itself doesn't make you a better golfer.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, I always wonder what he actually writes down, Matt Fitzpatrick. Does he write down the distance, what club he used, how he was feeling,
I
or
think it's everything. I think they track like his intent on each shot,
right?
the number he wanted to hit, carry distance. I actually know one of the people who helps him with it, and it's pretty intense what he
Pretty
does. But
thorough.
you know what? It suits his personality. There's plenty of tour players who don't even track stats who've had great careers too, but like that's clearly part of his like DNA as a person and his personality, and he's going to do it no matter what, and that makes him comfortable. And then you
Mhm.
have players that are like more, field-based players who couldn't care less about the stats, and they do just fine as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, one question actually that's pertinent to me in my game, and I think you guys did an episode on it in the podcast, but like in terms of shot shape, do you think it's better that somebody has one predominant shape 99% of the time and to kind of eliminate one side of the golf course or kind of be able to work it both ways? Because I find myself when I play, I usually work the ball right to left, but I'll get up in a tee and I'm like, I'm feeling like a fade here. And that's just bad kind of decision making because I'm going against the grain of what I naturally do.
Yeah,
So
I think,
sometimes,
I personally I prefer one shot shape. There's been a lot of coaches who find different ways to say this. Like Scott Fawcett, for example, is a great way of saying it. It's like it's not about eliminating one side of the course. So I put a stat in my book when like Dustin Johnson was the best driver of the golf ball in the world from like I think it was 2017 to 2019. He actually missed on both sides of the fairway equally, although he was playing a fade.
mm,
So someone would say, "Oh, he's playing a fade, therefore he would miss to the right side of the fairway more often." And if you told me that you were missing, 40% of your shots to the right of the fairway and only 10 on the left with the fade, I'd say you'd be like, "Oh, that's a good thing." Some people say. I'd say, "No, you'd rather miss equally on both sides like TJ was." And the reason for that is because when you get so good at one shot shape, what you're really doing is double crossing it less. And that's the real benefit of playing one shot shape is that when you set up for a fade, you don't want to hit a pull hook. Those are the absolute round killers. I could
yeah,
live with a little bit of a push to the right, but if you're setting up for a fade and you hit a left going left shot, that's where the big numbers come
mm,
from. So the problem becomes there are examples of golfers who can work the ball both ways, but most of the time they're outliers in the professional world and that like they're just that good.
yeah,
Now for normal players, I would say you can't tell me most of the time that you're going to be on target more often and more importantly, eliminate big misses by working the ball both ways. I would probably argue that most players would do better in the long run with one shot shape versus trying to shape it to the hole because for every time you hit that draw that isn't your normal shot shape and it works out, I bet you're going to hit several more shots that are such big misses and disproportionately penalize you that they get rid of those gains from the draw and then some. So
hmm
long story short, I would say get really good at one shot shape and stick with it. If you're in a situation where you have to bend it around the trees and all that, like I'm more of a draw player. I hit kind of a straightish or draw shot.
hmm
If I got to hit a big slice around the trees and I can feel like I could do it, yeah, I'll pull that out once in a while, but I'm not going to try and fade it everywhere. So I'm more of like a one trick pony, keep things simple type of
Keep it
player.
simple. Yeah, no, totally. No, I agree. Yeah, also, how do you propose that one would go about kind of changing their self-image or self-identity as a golfer? We'll say, for instance, you're a six handicap and you turned in level par. That person's probably uncomfortable standing on the 10th tee, and more likely than not, their scores are going to go up on the back nine. And just yeah, we all seem to have like an inner thermostat that we're comfortable at a score, and you can start
Hmm.
off really well, and then you'll probably regress to the mean. And likewise, you might start off the front nine really bad. And then you'll be like, this is not me. I'm better than this. And then you'll somehow like, go better at the back nine. So it's just such a common thing that every golfer has experienced.
Yeah, listen, the way I think about it now is that, you know, my score will fluctuate no matter what I do, right? As good as I get, there's going to be a high end, a low end, and most of the scores will fall in that like, 60, 70% band.
Hmm
So if I go out and I shoot 4 under on the front and I start to panic because, oh my God, I'm going to shoot my best round ever. I think that's the sign of lack of experience. So, breaking through scoring milestones is a lot about experience as it is about skill. And, breaking 80 used to be a big deal for me. I would get very nervous when I was around like, 6, 7, 8 over. I'm like, oh, am I going to do it? And, eventually, like I got good enough where I kept putting myself in that situation. So you have to be good enough to put yourself in these situations. And if you're
Mm.
not, then if it happens once or twice a year, then yeah, that's where you're at. You have to accept that. But the more and more you put yourself in those moments and you're open to quote unquote failing and then paying attention to what happens and adjusting for the next time, like that's how you get this comfort with scoring milestones. And so it's a combination of actually being good enough to do the milestone you want.
Mhm.
So you can put yourself in that situation enough, and then you've got to fail and you've got to learn from it and not beat yourself up so that, yeah, like for me, shooting under par, I was doing it a lot 2, 3, 4 years ago. And I kind of like removed that mental burden. The last year or two, like I just haven't been doing it as much. I haven't been putting as well, maybe one less great shot around. And yeah, it's been a little bit more of a struggle. So you also have to understand that like your game like ebbs and flows over the years. So, for some years breaking 90 for you might be easier, or in other years it might be harder. It's just part of the game and it's hard to accept that at times.
Yeah, it's like just variance, right? Hello, Sean, can you hear me? Hello. Sorry, can you hear me, John?
Yes, now I can.
Oh
Sorry, you
yeah,
cut out
sorry about
there.
that.
All good.
Yeah, just on that, I think one thing I found really effective was the Super Six. I think Karl Morris came up with it years ago, just like breaking down 18 holes into six kind of three holes. So
Yep.
just after every third hole, you're on 40, you kind of reset. You kind of have that mental kind of refreshment of like whatever happened happened, and this is another three holes. Let's see what I can do here. So it's really helpful at just a mental reset, I
Yeah, I
find.
think if you want to do it that way, like I do the reset when I feel like I need it, and then I ask myself that question. I'm like, let's just see what happens if I stick with my plan here. You
Mm,
know, and usually, and that could be because I'm playing really well or playing really poorly, right? Because when you're playing really well, you have one set of problems, like don't blow it. And then when you're
hmm
really playing poorly, you're like, ugh, how bad is this going to get? And either way, I still ask myself the same question. I'm like, let's just hang in there and see what happens if I kind of stick with my plan here. And I know I'll feel good about that afterwards, no matter what happens. Like I'm open to the score going the way it is, going higher, lower, but like I know I'll regret it if I played into the score too much and started pulling different clubs. If I was playing too well, like in the past, I would try and play safe. And now I'm like, no, just go
keep
for it.
going.
Keep doing what you're gonna do. And even if I'm playing poorly, that doesn't mean I play aggressively now. I still do the same thing. Like, so I value consistency and I value having like really good habits and just repeating them over and over again. And I get a lot of satisfaction from that because generally the scores will be better, but also I feel better after the round because I'm like, I didn't give in to the short term, like, randomness that golf throws at you in almost every round.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just asked myself, I'm like, hey, this happened. Maybe I just made a triple bogey, but let's just see what happens if I stick with the plan and we'll think about it after the round and hopefully I hung in there. Some
Yeah,
days
like
I
I
can't.
find
Some days I can't.
yeah, like momentum is kind of like a fallacy really in the game of golf, but I find when you're playing well, you kind of want to ride that momentum and keep it
Yeah,
going,
it's
bleeding into the next hole. But when you're playing bad, you kind of want to stop that train wreck and kind of refresh.
I do think it sometimes depends on the player. Like there are certain players who just need to convince themselves of this stuff. I'm not personally. I'd rather create my own momentum by saying like, oh, I had a tough stretch there, but I feel good because I didn't like get angry or do something stupid. Like I can create some momentum there that is independent of the score I shoot.
Hmm
So I'm trying to create momentum with like the stuff that I can literally do every time. I don't know if I can make more birdies, but I know that I could not start choosing dumb targets and like play like an idiot. I can control that.
Right. Control the controllables.
Yeah, and listen, everyone is saying the same thing on some level, but as you as a golfer, you know that's the right thing to do. You need to figure out whether it's me or a million other coaches who say it in a different way. Like you need to figure out a way to do it for yourself. Because I think we all mostly know the right thing to do for the most part. You know, there's things that I've taught people in the book and elsewhere. They're like, oh, I never knew that. But once you understand the rules, it's more about this thing where you're like, no different than diet or personal finance. Like, we generally know what foods to eat. We generally know to save more money, save money and not spend more than we are. Like, we know these things, but how do you actually do it and hold yourself accountable to it? That's the hard part and your controllables. And that's what I try and help people uncover, and I'm trying to figure it out better for myself. But that really ends up being the game in the end, I think.
Hmm. Yep. I'm actually intrigued. I wasn't aware that you were working with Mackenzie Hughes, right?
Yeah, I've been working with Mac for over 2 years now.
Oh, fantastic. And is visualization or like positive body language on the course, is that something that you talk about him with, or it's something he
Yeah,
works on?
yes, he's the type of player who can get very down on himself and angry at himself, and I could watch him on TV and know how he's playing.
Based on his body language?
Yeah, I could just see the look on his face where he's a little too serious.
Right.
And he's kind of found his best recipe is where, you know, his instinct as a player is to be super serious and hard on himself, which
Mhm.
let's face it, a lot of golfers are like that.
Mhm.
And, we've just found that when he's in a little bit more of a playful mood, like cracking jokes with his caddy, he's serious with what he's doing. Of course, this is his job. He wants to play well. But, in between shots, he's not like, you know, getting too hot-headed, or even if he does, like figuring, we have ways for him to calm himself down. But yeah, it like we always talk about like when the vibes are good, like good things seem to follow for him.
Right.
So a lot of it like is setting his intentions with his attitude because, you know, he feels good about that. We're very similar in the sense that like when we talk after most rounds we play, we say like, did you execute the plan? You might have shot a 76, but did you do everything you could to make this round as good as it could have been? And if the answer is yes, well, hey, that's golf. And some days, it's a 63 and everything went well and his putter got hot. And those are fun too. We get excited about those. But to be honest with you, we talk a lot about our silent victories. So, like, if you looked at his rounds for the last 2 years, there's so many rounds in there that, you might see a 73 or a 68 on the scorecard. But there's something happened, something he was dealing with that we both agreed was, you know, a win for him. Maybe it was finishing 17th in a tournament he should have missed the cut in.
Right.
There's all these little mini victories that we know about privately that no one else would know about, and that really boils down to like, yeah, his version of the controllables, and his attitude is a big part of that. He's someone who could be really hard on himself, and he expects a lot from himself because he's one of the best in the world at what he does. But in the same sense, he's a golfer. We're all flawed and we make mistakes, and it's hard for him to accept that at times because he's so good. So yeah, it's really hard to play professional golf for a living. Like I admire him. He handles it really well.
Yeah.
And, I'm just there to really hold him accountable to the stuff that we know that's good for him.
Right. And do you incorporate breath work at all on or off the
Yeah,
course with
we
him?
we definitely talk about it. The tour has been good. They bring people out once in a while to help them with stuff like that.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, they bring out coaches and do seminars. So yeah, we've talked about that. Like I believe in breath work. I've used it a lot in tournaments myself when I'm under pressure. Whether it's like box breathing, I like the physiological side that I think Andrew Huberman's made popular.
Hmm.
478 is something I've done before big tournaments before I've teed off, or just like literally paying attention to it because if I'm paying attention to that, then I'm not paying attention to something else that's probably less productive. So
Right.
these are just like golf's like a big game of finding like I think really clever ways to distract yourself from thinking about your score and results.
Just trying to stay present. That's almost like the
Yeah, it's
hardest
it's
thing in the
hard. It's
game.
so hard. And I find it a really creative problem to solve. Like again, everyone knows that's what you should be doing, but actually doing it and finding
Mhm.
ways to do it and holding yourself accountable to it, like that to me is when you can figure that out and do it more often. Like that's a huge win. Like that to me is a very satisfying part of the game.
For sure. Yeah, I think breath work and like just controlling your breath and being conscious of it is such like it's kind of an overlooked aspect, but it's so very important. Like I mean, when you're coming to play a shot, like you don't want to be tense. You want to be kind of I always like to think of an exhale before I walk into a shot to make sure
Yeah.
I'm relaxed.
Humans have
Um,
been figuring this out for, people have been breathing. You could find it in texts from over 1,000 years ago. So humans have always known that this is a good way to calm ourselves down, and it's a great tool to use on the golf course when you need it.
Yeah, totally. And I think only recently, like nasal breathing has become popular and kind of just the best way to breathe. And Rory talked not too long ago about how he's like concentrating on nasal breathing because if you look at older videos of him after a shot, he has his mouth like hanging open. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's something that he's worked on. But it's so simple and but it's obviously super important.
Yeah, that's why I like the physiological size. So it's like a deep inhale through the nose, a quick hold, and then another half inhale, and then a huge exhale through the mouth. And you do that a few times, like, yeah, your body will feel more relaxed. So, you try and take like your kind of temperature throughout the round, and you're like, oh, am I squeezing too hard? Am I too tense? And you're like, okay, maybe I'm standing on the green. I've done this plenty of times in tournaments where I'm just like, I wear sunglasses all the time when I play, so you can't tell I'm doing this, but I'm just like
Right.
literally staring out into the abyss and just going through like breathing and letting my mind just like go blank while everyone else is putting or on the tee box. And I will go to that when I need it. You can't do it all the time. You can't overdose on it, but I think it's a great like if you feel anxious and nervous and all of the other emotions that golf will do to us, like it's a great tool. And more importantly, do it when you're not on the course too. Like it's a good thing in life too, but you also want to like be more practiced at it because it will be more effective if it's something that you do more often.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because in golf, really, if it's a 5 hour round, you might only actually be playing golf for like maybe, half an
Yeah,
hour,
it's
40
sure,
minutes.
yeah, at most, at most.
Yeah, so you have a lot of time to, you're with your playing partners and you're walking to your next shot. What's your mind doing? You know what I mean? So
Yep.
it's very good to, they're somewhat controllable. So it's very important to look
Absolutely.
at.
Yeah, it's you can be productive with that time, and productive might be just honestly having a good time with your friends and playing partners and having a good chat, right? Like that's a
Yeah,
great way to spend that time productively, in my opinion.
sure. Yeah, something we might actually close on, John. I'm conscious of your time. What's the most counterintuitive thing that you've found over the last few years, like being in the game for so long with yourself or helping other people? Like one thing that for me, I recently heard a podcast with Sasho McKenzie on the No Lane Up pod, and he was
Hmm.
talking about how statistically he's gathered data from like all handicap levels, and statistically they're better putters by looking at the hole while they're putting.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, that's wild to me. And I think the only person that comes to mind who actually did it was like Jordan Spieth inside five
Yes.
feet for a
He
couple
did
of
it.
years.
He did, yes.
But that to me was kind of like an aha moment and just surprising.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of counterintuitive things about golf. Like for me, the big one is like most people who take up golf have come from another sport. And they think that physical exertion and trying harder will lead to better results. So that just doesn't work in golf. So, that's my big counterintuitive truth about golf is that you can't try harder. You almost have to try less and calm yourself down and relax yourself versus if you were a basketball player, soccer player, whatever the sport was, like you usually have to pump yourself up to overcome someone physically or your own fatigue. That's not the
Mhm.
case in golf. Like we were just talking about breathing and calming yourself down, and other athletes do that in the field of play. But golf's different to me. Like you have to find a way to like. Most people need to find a way to try less. Like they're usually too zoned in and they're too focused on their score and they're too tense in their forearms and their upper body and they need to go in the opposite direction. So that to me is like the big counterintuitive part about golf is like it attracts control freaks who think they can control everything and they try and control the things that are really out of their control and it drives them crazy and it tenses them up and it doesn't work. And I'm saying that as a control freak myself.
Right. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of something Corey Carrington said a while ago. Like you can't control or force birdies, you can only allow them.
Yeah,
So you
they
just
just
have to
kind of
kind of
like
surrender.
Yeah, they're kind of like a byproduct of all of the practice, all of the good decisions you're making. Like you don't manifest them. They're a byproduct of many other things that it's hard to put your finger on at any moment.
Yeah, it's quite elusive. When it happens, it's beautiful. So you just
Yeah,
kind of have to,
and when it does happen, enjoy it, right? Like
right?
don't wait for the next one. Like pat yourself on the back. Like that's, maybe a parting word I'll give people is that, learning to identify your good shots. Obviously, a birdie's a good outcome, but even hitting a 7-iron on the green or, a really nice two putt from 50 feet away, like don't let these moments pass. Like you don't have to do a tiger fist, pump,
Right.
but at least acknowledge it internally that something good happened and like that was exciting and fun. Um, I think too many golfers let those moments pass, myself included, and then focus too much on the stuff they don't like about themselves. And as that's another counter to of truth. You'd have to kind of flip those two. So yeah, hard. It's a hard game, but we obviously all love it. We're obsessed with it, and I just hopefully find ways for people to kind of wrap their heads around it properly.
Sure. Yeah. If you're going to get angry about the bad shots, you might as well get happy and joyful over the good shots, right?
Yeah, right. Or why else are you doing it?
Yeah, totally. It's a game. It's fun.
It is.
Yeah. Listen, John, it's been really, really nice talking to you. And can you let us know where we can find out more about you?
Pretty simple. My YouTube channel, Jon Sherman Golf. I'm putting a lot of effort in there. You can listen to the Sweet Spot podcast, and then my book, The Four Foundations of Golf, and I have a book on competition called The Foundations of Winning Golf. Both of those are available on Amazon, and then you can find me on Twitter at Practical Golf.